Dawn breaks cold over Lower Manhattan, summer 1978. Cement trucks idle outside a construction site on 40th Street, engines rumbling, drivers waiting for the signal. One phone call can shut it all down. One phone call determines who builds and who loses millions. If you love stories about control, territory, violence, and the machinery of extortion that turned construction itself into a weapon, make sure to follow, because this one ends with America's most powerful mob bosses convicted for turning concrete into liquid gold, and every building project into a shakedown. New York City, summer 1978. The skyline climbs higher every month. Cranes swing steel beams across morning fog. Concrete mixers churn grey slurry that hardens into office towers, apartment blocks, bridges. $10 billion in construction contracts flow through the city each year. Behind every pour, behind every union hall, behind every signed contract, 5 families control the flow. Gambino, Genovese, Colombo, Lucchese, Bonanno. They do not build the city. They tax it. They own the material, the labor, the schedule. They own time itself. The weapon is concrete. Not guns, not bombs. Concrete. The material that builds everything becomes the lever that stops everything. A 15-minute delay in truck delivery costs hours of lost work. A missing shipment halts an entire site. Workers stand idle. Cranes freeze mid-swing. Developers watch money evaporate. In a city where every project runs on precision timing, the mob learns that controlling concrete means controlling the city. It starts decades earlier during the Great Depression. Construction unions clash with contractors. Strikes shut down projects for weeks, sometimes months. Men need work. Contractors need certainty. The mob offers a solution. Pay us, and the strikes disappear. Pay us and labor stays peaceful. Pay us and concrete arrives on time. Contractors call it a necessary evil. They tell themselves they have no choice. The system embeds itself, year after year, contract after contract, until it becomes the only system anyone remembers. By the 1970s, the arrangement has a name. The Concrete Club. Not a social organization, not a trade association, an enforcement mechanism. The Commission, the ruling body of New York's 5 families, decides which construction jobs go to which mob-controlled companies. Any project worth more than $2 million requires their approval. Contractors who want to build pay a 2% tax on the total contract value, 2% of everything. Bridges, hospitals, apartment towers, office complexes. 2% flows directly into mob coffers. The kickbacks total millions. The Commission meets in restaurant backrooms and social clubs. They divide territories, assign contracts, settle disputes. Paul Castellano runs the Gambino family, the most powerful of the 5. He wears expensive suits, lives in a mansion on Staten Island, presents himself as a businessman. His organization controls Teamsters Local 282, the union representing concrete truck drivers. Without drivers, concrete does not move. Without concrete, nothing gets built. Castellano understands leverage. He uses it. Anthony Salerno, called Fat Tony, runs the Genovese family. He controls the District Council of Cement and Concrete Workers. The council oversees thousands of laborers who mix, pour, and finish concrete across the city. Salerno does not need to threaten every contractor personally. His control of the union is threat enough. Projects that refuse to cooperate face slowdowns, walkouts, mysterious equipment failures. Projects that pay the tax run smoothly. Ralph Scopo leads the Colombo family's construction racket. He serves as president of the Cement and Concrete Workers District Council until federal investigators start circling. Scopo allocates workers to job sites, negotiates contracts, ensures that mob-connected firms win the most lucrative bids. He coordinates with Castellano and Salerno to avoid conflicts, maintain pricing, divide the spoils. The families cooperate when profits demand it. Vincent Di Napoli operates for the Genovese family. His role is simpler, more direct. He collects. When contractors fall behind on payments, Di Napoli reminds them of obligations. He does not make idle threats. Everyone knows what happens to people who refuse to pay. Bodies turn up in car trunks in vacant lots, in the trunks of cars at airport parking garages. The message is consistent: pay or face consequences. Most pay. The mechanism functions through union control. Teamsters Local 28. 2 becomes a Gambino fief. 3 of its presidents go to prison in the 1980s and 90s. John Cody runs the local from 1976 to 1984. He takes bribes, sells sweetheart contracts to mob-controlled companies, uses union muscle to enforce mob will. Cody lives well. He owns a home in Florida, drives luxury cars, vacations in Europe. Union members see none of the benefits. Their pension funds get raided. Their safety concerns go ignored. Their wages stagnate while Cody and his mob handlers pocket millions. Cody's reign ends in scandal. In 1992, federal agents arrest him on charges of plotting to murder Robert Sasso, a government-appointed trustee trying to clean up Local 282. The murder plot fails, but the charges stick. Cody goes to prison. The pattern continues. New leadership takes over, same mob ties, same corruption, same shakedowns. The concrete club operates with surgical precision. Every major construction project in New York passes through their filter. Developers learn the system quickly. Submit plans, get approval, pay the tax, receive concrete, finish the project. Refuse any step, and the project dies. Stanley Sternchos, a contractor working on multiple sites in the 1980s, pays over $800,000 in bribes just to keep trucks moving. He considers it a cost of doing business. Other contractors make similar calculations. The alternative is bankruptcy. Some developers resist. The Liefrak and Resnick families, major real estate players, work with federal investigators to document the extortion. They provide records, testify in secret, take risks. Other builders cooperate with the mob without hesitation. Donald Trump constructs Trump Tower using methods that require massive amounts of ready-mix concrete. The concrete comes from mob-controlled suppliers. Trump later claims he had no choice, that all concrete in New York flows through mob channels. Investigators question this. Alternative suppliers exist. Some developers find them. Others choose not to look. The ready-mix concrete business becomes the club's most profitable front. Ready-mix arrives at job sites already prepared, water and aggregates already mixed with cement, ready to pour immediately. The mob owns the major suppliers: S&A Concrete, Cedar Summit. Other firms operate as legitimate businesses with illegitimate ownership. They charge premium prices, deliver mediocre product, and contractors pay without complaint. Complaints lead to delivery delays. Delays lead to cost overruns. Cost overruns lead to failed projects. No one wants to be the example. The violence stays mostly hidden, but it never disappears. Fred Fiorino, a Genovese associate and bagman who collects payoffs from contractors, gets murdered in June 1982. His body turns up in the trunk of a car at a Connecticut parking lot, decomposing, at least one bullet in his head. Fiorino knows too much about mob operations in the construction industry. When federal investigators start asking questions about labor racketeering and connections to Ronald Reagan's Labor Secretary Raymond Donovan, Fiorino becomes a liability. Liabilities get eliminated. The murder sends a message to anyone considering cooperation with authorities. The message works for years. Contractors stay silent. Union members stay silent. Even some law enforcement officials stay silent, either bought off or intimidated into inaction. The system seems unbreakable. The mob has controlled New York construction for decades. They have connections in city government, in state agencies, in union leadership. They have judges on payroll, building inspectors in their pocket, politicians who owe favors. The concrete club functions as an invisible government, taxing commerce, enforcing rules, punishing dissent. But the system contains a fatal flaw. It operates through hierarchy, through chains of command, through documented meetings and recorded conversations. The mob believes itself untouchable. They grow careless. They hold commission meetings in restaurants where federal agents plant listening devices. They discuss murders and extortion over tapped phone lines. They keep financial records that investigators eventually seize. Their own organizational structure, designed for control, becomes evidence of conspiracy. The turning point arrives in the mid-1980s. Federal prosecutors led by Rudolph Giuliani, then United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, build a case under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, known as RICO. The law targets criminal organizations, not just individual crimes. It allows prosecutors to charge mob bosses for ordering crimes, even if they never pull a trigger, never threaten a contractor directly, never appear at a crime scene. RICO changes the game. Giuliani assembles a team. FBI agents conduct surveillance, plant bugs, flip witnesses. They build a web of evidence connecting the commission to specific acts of extortion, murder, bid rigging. They document the 2% tax, track payments, follow money through shell companies and offshore accounts. They record conversations where mob leaders discuss dividing construction territories, assigning contracts, ordering violence. The case takes years to build. The evidence fills rooms. On February 25, 1985, federal agents execute simultaneous raids across New York. They arrest Paul Castellano, Anthony Salerno, Carmine Persico of the Colombo family, and other top leaders. The indictments detail 17 racketeering acts, including extortion, labor payoffs, loan sharking, and 3 murders. The construction industry charges form the core of the case. Prosecutors lay out how the commission controlled concrete, manipulated bids, extorted contractors, and murdered anyone who threatened the system. The trial begins in September 1986. It lasts 10 weeks. Prosecutors call contractors who paid bribes, union members who witnessed corruption, mob associates who flipped and testified against their former bosses. The defense argues that the defendants are legitimate businessmen, that the government is persecuting Italian Americans, that the evidence is circumstantial. The jury does not buy it. On November 19, 1986, they convict all 8 defendants on all counts. The verdict stuns the mob. For the first time, the commission itself faces justice. January 13, 1987, Sentencing Day. Federal Judge Richard Owen hands down maximum sentences, 100 years in prison for the top leaders. Anthony Salerno, 75 years old, receives a century behind bars. He dies in prison 5 years later. Paul Castellano does not attend sentencing. He was murdered on December 16, 1985, gunned down outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. John Gotti, a rival Gambino captain, orders the hit to seize control of the family. Castellano's death does not save the concrete racket. It ends anyway. The convictions shatter the concrete club. Without leadership, without protection, the system crumbles. Federal prosecutors move against the unions, installing trustees, removing corrupt officials, monitoring elections. The Department of Justice sues to break mob control of Teamsters Local 282. Oversight continues for decades. The Business Integrity Commission, created by New York City in the wake of the trials, monitors construction contracts, investigates bid rigging, bars mob-connected firms from public projects. The construction industry slowly cleans itself. Competition returns, prices drop. Projects no longer require mob approval. Contractors no longer pay 2% taxes to invisible bosses. The change takes years, but it happens. By the late 1990s, the stranglehold is broken. New companies enter the market. Union leadership changes. Federal oversight prevents backsliding. The mob's construction empire, built over half a century, collapses in less than a decade. But the violence leaves scars. Robert Kubecker and Donald Barstow, 2 Long Island waste management operators who cooperated with investigators, get murdered in August 1989. Lucchese family members order the hit because Kubecker and Barstow testified about mob control of garbage collection, a racket closely tied to construction. The killers walk into their office in broad daylight, shoot both men multiple times, leave their bodies for employees to find. The message is clear. Cooperation with authorities carries a death sentence. The Kubeka and Barstow murders lead to more prosecutions. Salvatore Avellino, a Lucchese captain, gets indicted in 1993 for ordering the killings. He eventually pleads guilty, receives a long prison sentence. The families continue to operate, but their power diminishes year by year. By the 2000s, the New York mob is a shadow of its former self. RICO prosecutions gut the leadership. Turncoats provide devastating testimony. Younger generations refuse to join. The era of mob-controlled construction ends not with a bang but with a series of convictions, sentences, and cooperating witnesses. The Concrete Club case reveals something fundamental about organized crime. The mob does not just operate on the margins of society. It embeds itself in essential industries, in union halls, in government offices. It transforms legal commerce into illegal enterprise. It uses violence not randomly but strategically, targeting those who threaten the system. It understands that real power comes not from controlling drugs or gambling, but from controlling the resources that build cities. The 2% tax generated hundreds of millions of dollars over decades. That money paid for mansions, for luxury cars, for political bribes, for legal defenses, for more violence. It inflated construction costs across New York, making housing more expensive, making infrastructure projects take longer, making the city itself more costly to maintain. Every apartment built with mob concrete cost more than it should have. Every bridge, every school, every hospital carried the hidden tax. The mob did not just steal from contractors, it stole from everyone. The case also reveals the limits of traditional law enforcement. For decades, police knew about mob control of construction. They made individual arrests, prosecuted individual crimes, but never dismantled the system. RICO changed that. By treating the mob as an ongoing criminal enterprise rather than a collection of individual criminals, prosecutors could target the structure itself. They could hold bosses accountable for crimes they ordered but did not personally commit. They could use evidence of conspiracy to prove a pattern of racketeering. The law finally caught up to the crime. The Mafia Commission Trial becomes a template. Federal prosecutors use RICO to dismantle mob control of other industries. The Fulton Fish Market, the garment district, the waste management industry all face similar prosecutions. Each case follows the same pattern. Document the hierarchy, prove the pattern, flip the witnesses, secure the convictions. The mob's greatest strength, its organizational structure, becomes its greatest weakness. But the story does not end with convictions. The concrete industry today still grapples with exploitation, just in different forms. Labor abuses, environmental destruction, and corrupt practices continue, often in countries with weak regulation. The concrete production moves overseas, to places where oversight barely exists, where workers have no protections, where environmental laws are suggestions rather than requirements. The Concrete Club is gone, but the impulse to control resources through violence and intimidation persists. In 2018, the French cement giant Lafarge faces charges of complicity in crimes against humanity for paying millions to ISIS and other jihadist groups in Syria to keep a cement plant operating during the civil war. The company argues it had no choice, that operating in conflict zones requires compromise. Prosecutors argue it funded terrorism to maintain profits. The case mirrors the Concrete Club in essential ways. A construction material company uses money and violence to ensure supply chains remain open. The tactics evolve, the geography shifts, but the underlying logic remains the same. Concrete flows, profits rise, consequences get ignored until someone forces accountability. The Concrete Club teaches a final lesson about markets and violence. Economic control produces violence when the stakes are high enough and the oversight is weak enough. The mob did not start with murder. It started with labor disputes and strike-breaking. It escalated slowly, embedding itself in union structures, in contractor relationships, in government offices. By the time the violence started, the system was so entrenched that violence seemed like the only enforcement mechanism left. Contractors who refused to pay had to be made examples. Witnesses who cooperated with authorities had to be silenced. Violence became a business tool, calculated and deployed to maintain market share. The convictions in 1986 broke that cycle in New York. The commission members went to prison, the unions came under federal oversight, the construction industry opened to competition. The cycle broke because investigators built cases that could not be ignored, because prosecutors used laws designed to target criminal organizations, because juries believed the evidence. It broke because people decided it had to break. Today, construction in New York operates differently. Projects bid competitively. Unions elect their own leaders without mob interference. The Business Integrity Commission monitors contracts for signs of bid rigging. The system is not perfect. Corruption still exists. But the systematic, organized, violent control that defined the concrete club era is gone. That change matters. It proves that even deeply embedded criminal enterprises can be dismantled if law enforcement has the tools, the will, and the evidence. A cement mixer idles on a Manhattan street in 2025. The driver waits for the signal to pour. No one calls a mob boss for permission. No one pays a 2% tax. No one fears a phone call that shuts down the job. The concrete flows. The work continues. The city builds itself higher. The concrete club is history, preserved in court transcripts, in FBI files, in the memories of contractors who survived the era. The buildings it helped construct still stand, every floor a testament to how economic control becomes violence, and how violence, when finally confronted, can end.